The dust rose high above the desert trail, shimmering in the burning sun, as if the earth itself were ashamed of what was happening on its surface. A crowd had gathered, not out of joy but out of greed. 2 Apache sisters, their wrists bound, and their eyes clouded with fear, stood before men who measured them as if they were livestock. The auctioneer's voice rang out sharp and callous, each word slicing into the hearts of those who dared to care. They were young, perhaps too young, to fully understand why the world had turned so cruel, but old enough to know the weight of despair. Every gaze upon them carried hunger, not for companionship, not for kindness, but for possession. To these men, they were not daughters, not sisters, not human beings with beating hearts. They were objects traded like cattle beneath the scorching sky. And that was when the voice came steady, deep, and unlike the others. "I'll take them home." Heads turned. At the edge of the crowd stood a rancher. He wasn't wealthy, nor was he the sort of man to draw attention. His clothes were plain, his hat worn by years of work under the sun, and his horse as modest as his life. But his eyes held something no one else there seemed to carry: mercy. He didn't bargain, he didn't sneer, and he didn't weigh their value. He simply stepped forward and paid the price to end their humiliation. The sisters looked at him with wide eyes, uncertain if this was another cruel twist. Could a stranger really mean to save them? Or was this just another chapter in a story they had no power to write? The rancher loosened the ropes around their wrists, gentle as one might untangle the legs of a bird caught in wire. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're going home." But safety was not immediate. Their journey back to the ranch was filled with shadows of fear. Every rustle in the grass made the sisters flinch. Every distant shout reminded them of the fair market square. They had known betrayal too many times to believe in kindness easily. The rancher, sensing this, did not force words or promises. Instead, he let his actions speak. He shared his food, offered his horse when the desert heat grew unbearable, and built the small fire each night to keep away the chill. Slowly, the walls of mistrust began to crack. One evening, as the flames flickered against the dark, the elder sister whispered her name. It was the first piece of trust she had given anyone since her world had collapsed. The younger followed, shy but hopeful. From then on, their silence began to fill with stories, their childhood memories of running free across the plains, their mother's laughter, their father's pride. The rancher listened, not as a man who demanded, but as one who valued every word, yet kindness alone did not erase the danger. Word spread quickly that the sisters had been taken from the market, and those who profited from such trades did not take kindly to losing. Men on horseback began following their trail, determined to reclaim what they considered property. One night the rancher awoke to the faint echo of hooves. He knew what it meant. The next morning he gathered the sisters. "If we are to make it home, we must ride hard. But hear me when I say this, you are not alone. No man will lay claim to you again, not while I draw breath." Fear turned to courage in the sisters' hearts. Though they had suffered, though they had been broken down to nothing, they found strength in his words. Together they pressed forward. Across rivers, through canyons, over ridges where the wind howled, they traveled with one single goal: freedom. Pursuers came close more than once. Arrows pierced the air, bullets rang against stone, and shouts filled the valleys. But each time, the rancher shielded the sisters, guiding them to safety with grit and determination. His horse stumbled, his body bruised, but his spirit never wavered. Finally, after days that felt like a lifetime, the small ranch appeared on the horizon. It was no palace, no grand estate, just a humble home surrounded by fields of grass and a fence built by weathered hands. Yet to the sisters, it was more beautiful than any kingdom. For it was not the land that mattered, but the promise it carried. A place where no one would treat them as less than human. As the days turned into weeks, the sisters began to heal. They learned to trust the silence of the ranch, where the only sounds were the lowing of cattle, the creak of saddles, and the rustle of wind through the grass. They helped with chores, their hands slowly regaining strength. They laughed again, first timidly, then fully, their voices rising like songs carried by the breeze. The rancher never asked for gratitude, never demanded repayment. To him, their presence was enough. But in their hearts, the sisters knew he had given them something far greater than shelter. He had given them dignity, the chance to live as daughters of the earth, not as possessions of men. One evening, as Pizrenti, as Devditi as daughters of the earth, not as possessions of men. One evening, as possessions of men. One evening, as Pivang Tutamadvez of the earth. The sun dipped low and painted the sky in colors of fire. The elder sister spoke. "You said you would take us home," she murmured, her eyes glistening. "And you did. But you gave us more than a home. You gave us back ourselves." The rancher nodded, his gaze resting on the horizon. A home is not walls or land. It's the place where no one owns you but yourself. Their story spread quietly, whispered from one campfire to another until it reached distant towns and tribes. It became not just a tale of rescue, but a symbol of hope that even in the harshest times, there are those who stand against cruelty, who see worth where others see only cost. And so, the Apache sisters lived not as shadows of their past, but as women of strength and spirit, carrying with them the memory of a man who chose mercy when the world offered none. Their lives became proof that one act of kindness can heal wounds deeper than chains, and that sometimes the truest home is found not in a place, but in the arms of those who choose to see your humanity. By the end of their journey, the sisters understood something that would never leave them. Even in a world that once traded them like cattle, they had been shown a truth more powerful than cruelty, that compassion is the strongest force of all. And that is where their story lingers, not in sorrow, but in inspiration. A reminder for all who listen, no matter how broken the road, no matter how cruel the world, there is always a chance to find a hand that will lead you home.